is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records. And this is a fun, shorter episode that I just thought it would be kind of cool to do something like this. I've been wanting to do something like this for a long time, and we are in the process of moving a bunch of things around down here right now. So it became a possibility to even do a video like this. So I'm going to try and jam through these really quickly. We'll see how successful I am. But I just grabbed some of my favorite music books, either books about music or written by a musician. So this is not comprehensive. This is not ranked. This is just going through what I had on the shelves and things. Some of these have great resonance in my life. So I'm just gonna kind of run through these. I thought it would be fun. First is On the Road with Bob Dylan by Larry Ratso Sloman, with a foreword by my man, they don't make Jews like Jesus no more, Kinky Friedman. That's right, the asshole from El Paso, an American fucking hero. This is an amazing book. It's probably my favorite Bob Dylan book because it is the, oh wow, you can see back when I bought this at a Borders. Remember Borders? I used to love Borders. Yes, they were a big corporate chain, but god damn it, they had the goods. I truly miss Borders. But this is my favorite Bob Dylan book in a lot of ways because it is, no pun intended, the most freewheelin'. It is the most like rock and roll book. It details the Rolling Thunder tour. Larry was a confidant of Bob and good buddy of Kinky Friedman, and they are just some get down motherfuckers. And I think sometimes Bob's image is a little pretentious, or not his image, but the writing around him is a little pretentious. And this is not pretentious. Look at Bob and Kinky. God damn. Look at those. Look up the Chabad telethon with these two on it in the 80s. Amazing. It just, I feel like this contextualizes Bob in an extremely approachable way. And it's just a great book. Larry is a great writer. So highly recommended. This is something I got not that long, a couple of years ago. This is amazing. This is Carl Sandburg, The American Song Bag. How cool is this? And it's sheet music, and then Carl Sandburg writing notes and little annotations to the songs. How cool is this? Such a great book. Crazy sort of depth. And, it was written in a more contemporaneous time when this music was being discovered. So this is just amazing. So this was written in the 1920s. This is just incredible. So I cannot recommend this enough. One other thing is folk music has really been dragged around. I mean, I feel like a lot of genres, I tend to go on about the corporatization of things, and I feel like it's decimated a lot of forms of music, and but I think folk has gotten it the worst, because at least what's happened with country music and R&B and hip-hop and rock and roll is at least vaguely tied. They at least dress up in the outfits that they're supposed to dress up in. Folk music, however, has just been turned for the past 50 years. It's just been turned into mopey and kind of embarrassing person holding an acoustic guitar, right? And folk music is not that. Folk music is several strains of traditional forms of music, and if you were a folk singer, that meant that you had a repertoire covering hundreds and hundreds of all of these different kinds of songs that had come over from ancient cultures, and reaching back hundreds and hundreds of years. So this book does a great job of contextualizing it in a non-academic, beautiful way, because it's written by Carl Sandburg, for God's sake. What more do you want? Going far, far away from folk music, we have John Lydon's first book, Rotten, No Irish, No Blacks, No Dogs. John subsequently wrote another book a few years ago, Anger is an Energy. I have that book. It's good. It's more of just a straightforward autobiography. And, you know, because it's dealing with such a much longer timeline, it sort of truncates a lot of things for the sake of space. It's still a very long book. This, however, really does just cover the Sex Pistols, and it has a lot of other different voices. It has everybody, Chrissie Hynde and Billy Idol. It has the other members of the band. Like, there's a lot of different scene people. It's just an amazing, amazing book. So Bob Gruen. But this book, I would have read this when I was about 19. It had a profound impact on my thinking and ways of looking at things. I already was a huge Sex Pistols fan. This only made me love them more. So, and just John is just such a commanding writer in this book. I mean, it's all oral. It was all, you know, transposed, but good Lord, just commands your attention. Brilliant, brilliant. Yes, one of my favorite rock and roll picture books. I bought this at like some discount bookstore, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something. And it's David Bailey. David Bailey, you would know him. He was the inspiration behind David Hemmings portrayed an inspiration of him. Boy, that's a convoluted way of saying it. In Antonioni's masterpiece, The Blow Up. And this is just such a cool book. David Bailey is just like an absolutely incredible photographer. And I feel like he did the Stones Jumpin' Jack Flash sleeve. If you've ever seen that, it's like kind of the Jumpin' Jack Flash Child of the Moon sleeve. It's like one of the best like 45 sleeves ever. Like he's the guy who did the famous Lennon McCartney photos. And where I'm looking for, oh God, the Stones in '68, his photos of the Stones in '68 are like the greatest pictures. I mean, look at this. Look at these guys. Fucking look at Keith. Is he not like the ultimate rock and roll looking motherfucker that's ever lived? Look at that guy. Jesus. Amazing. So his pictures of the Stones I'm very, very, very fond of. This being one of my favorites. So, at any rate, this book is just glorious good fun. And every photo I'm looking at, I love this one of John. I love this session with John and Yoko. I love this. It's awesome. He did the goat's head soup photos. I could just keep going through this. I love it. And David Bailey is one of the angels of rock and roll, without ever having played an instrument. But somebody who did play an instrument was Ray Davies. I know it's Davis, but god damn it, I mean Davies, for fuck's sake. Ray Davies of the Kinks, this is his autobiography, but not autobiography, X-Ray. This is amazing. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. It's basically written as like an alternate future dystopian science fiction odyssey. It's really, really, really good and really terse and funny and smart and awesome. I remember years ago, I would have been, when I was 17, there was this guy that I worked with, and he was sort of a loner, and he like lived alone in his parents' house. He was this really eccentric guy, and he was nice to talk to, but he would never sort of say anything about his own life. And one day in the cafeteria on our lunch breaks, he was reading a book, and I was like, because I was like, now I'm going to find out something about him. And I was like, what are you reading? And he has this, and he's like, do you like the Kinks? And all I knew at that, because I was a mere 17-year-old, I had never even heard Waterloo Sunset. I heard, what did I know at this point? You Really Got Me, All Day and All Night. Is that it? That can't be it. Oh, Come Dancing. And then there was that song, Hey Trid, woo, Hey Trid, that was on their last album. Was that Phobia? Because they used to play it on the radio when I was in art class in high school. That was it. And I was like, I don't know anything about him. I like the Kinks. I like the 2 songs from the 60s that I know. And I very sheepishly kind of slunk away. And he was like, I think he was excited because I think he thought he was going to get to talk to me about this. Finally, he was going to open up to somebody. And I didn't know jack shit about Ray Davies at that point. So, at any rate, guy who I used to work with, if you ever see this, God bless. And sorry, I was an uninformed teenager. I could easily do a whole video of my Beatles/John Lennon books, so I'm trying to keep that to a minimum, but I gotta throw this one in. I haven't seen this. I don't know if this got reissued at any point. I have no idea. This is Skywriting by Word of Mouth, written by John, and it was... he refers to it in the 1980 Playboy interviews that he'd written a bunch of crazy stuff that was like in his own right. And this is a wild read. It's all over the place. There's like, he tries to sort of like start narratives or create characters and then gets bored really fast and just goes off on these like impenetrable wordplay tangents that are just spectacular. And if you like that stuff, if you read it in his own right or a Spaniard in the Works, you know what I'm talking about. Like it's glorious. If you like that kind of thing, you love it. And John's the man. Also, this includes what would have theoretically been show notes or notes for the playbill for the Ballad of John and Yoko Broadway play that I guess him and Yoko kind of sort of were maybe gonna work on. And they are brutal. They are the opposite of the anarchic, ultra-dense wordplay. They are plain-spoken, severe, kind of brutal and kind of amazing. You know, and still yet leaves a lot of mysteries. There's some really weird stuff about Gnostics, and he throws in just enough to keep you scratching your head. But this is a really, really, really cool, fun, weirdo book that I've always loved, and I've read many times over the years. I would have gotten it when I was, who knows, 15 or 16. This would have, what year would this have come out? Does it say? It doesn't. Pardon me, I'm actually going to see if I can actually find the publishing date on this. So, yes, okay, 1999, that's what I thought. One of my, and I will be doing a review of one of his albums pretty soon. My man, Richie Havens, one of my all-time favorite guitar players. Unbelievable, like the best rhythm guitar player that's ever lived, like the ultimate, like what Eddie Van Halen is to guitar soloing, he is to rhythm playing. There, I said it. I saw him twice play live. He was fucking ridiculous. So this book came out in 1999. They Can't Hide Us Anymore. It's his autobiography, and this is autographed. And when he asked what my name was, and I said Rich, he laughed and said, "Oh, I know how to spell that." So I saw him play twice. I met him twice. He was a ridiculously charming man, a ridiculously smart man, a sparkling, wonderful human being. Like, Jesus Christ. And he goes in depth on his guitar technique. So if you like Richie Havens' guitar playing, and for the love of God, how could you not? he goes through with pictures. So there's some really cool stories. He knew Jimi Hendrix way early on. Like, this is just a great book. It's a great autobiography, and he just tells all his stories. And this is one of the real guys. It's one of the real people, and I love him. So then we'll sort of cheat, and we'll just do 2 in 1. You Saw It Coming. Both books by Lester Bangs. The first one, Psychotic Reactions, Carburetor Dung, and then this one. This is the one I can't remember. Mainlines, Blood Feasts, and Bad Taste. I thought that this was going to be the start of them putting out more Lester stuff, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. But there's a lot of. I mean, this is probably the better book in some ways. Especially if you're new to Lester, but the best thing that he ever wrote, I think, is his review of Funhouse by the Stooges. Like, go and read that if you've never read Lester. But like his sort of long piece about the Clash. I mean, I like the Clash, but he was enthralled with the Clash. But it's just interesting to see it through his eyes and see London '77 through his eyes. Yeah, I mean, at his best, he was one of the very best. I mean, I think he's in sort of like a group of like 3 people maybe who I think was a truly great rock and roll writer. There's a few things I think had he lived, especially some of his later pieces. He what did he call himself? There are people who think that he said something like in one of his essays. There are people who think I've de-evolved into a eye-rolling moralistic, or into a gimme a break moralist. I can only imagine what he would be like now, because I have to imagine he would have kept going down that road. But like, Lester at his best is pretty unbelievable. The Reasonable Guide to Unlistenable Noise, is that what that one's called? That's amazing. His review of the Chicago Live album is amazing. It's hilarious. When he doesn't like something, he's almost better than when he does like something at certain times. I talked about this a hell of a lot in my Black Flag video, of course. Get in the Van. I mean, this is essential stuff. I mean, Christ, if you haven't read this. If you like rock and roll and you haven't read this, I mean, like, I don't know what to say. Like, this is... If you have no interest in Black Flag, you sort of have to read this. This is what it's all about. And the photos are, like, some of the best photos of bands ever. I don't know what to say. Like, it's incredible. And, yeah, I don't know how you couldn't love this. I don't know what even really there is to say about it. It was ridiculously inspirational to me as a teenager. I got it. I don't know that this is first pressing, but I got it pretty early on. I didn't do anything cool. I mean, I got this at Borders. I mean, I wasn't, I'm not... Oh, it is a first edition. Holy shit. It's a first edition. There you go. But I bought it at a Borders. I mean, I'm not cool. Never was and never will be. But yeah, it's amazing. Like, this is a really cool book I got a couple years ago. Little Symphonies, a Phil Spector reader. It is... I'm a really big Phil Spector fan. Obviously not a fan of some of the things that he did or why he ended up in jail. All right? Relax. But Phil Spector, the artist, is my fucking man. And again, 19, 20, 21, 22, I played his records at truly window-rattling volumes. I was fucking obsessed. I got the Back to Mono box set. I think I would have been 18 or 19 when I got that. And after seeing it for years in record stores, and Jesus Christ, I was very, very taken with his work. So this is just a really cool collection of essays about Phil and interviews, really in-depth interviews with people who knew him. It focuses on the work. It focuses on his methodology. And it focuses on how unprecedented he was and how genius he really was. So, Phil, look, if you're still upset, he deserved to die in jail, okay? I'm not a death penalty guy, but he did what he did, okay? So, does that work? But there's no besmirchifying the impertinosity. It's the first time I've said that on one of these, of the genius of the work. And this book does a really good job of contextualizing all of that. So, moving right along. This is a well pawed. This would have been a late 90s obsessive read. It Crawled from the South by Marcus Gray. It takes REM, it breaks them down into component parts. It's almost like an encyclopedia, but his lyrical analysis is amazing, and just his love of the band, his enthusiasm. And he contextualizes them, especially their earlier 80s stuff, in such a cool way. And there's something as rigid as the format is, and is sort of at a distance or clinical, it starts off, it isn't, because he has such a great sense of humor, and he has such joy and enthusiasm, and there's so much joy that he feels towards the music. And as much as he criticizes certain things about them, and sometimes things that should be criticized perhaps, the joy and enthusiasm carries it through, and humor. This is a wonderful love letter to a band. And this came out just before New Adventures in Hi-Fi, and he's not super big on Monster. So this is like, Bill Berry was still in the band. I mean, this is before things started to get kind of wonky. And as much as I love REM, things got fucking wonky after this. So this just beautifully summarizes and contextualizes them for the first decade and a half of their existence. It's a great book. This is a masterpiece. This book made me a fan of the band before I ever got into the band. Because as a younger person, I'll be honest, I had seen The Decline of Western Civilization, Part 1, and I was not impressed with the Germs, I'll be honest. I thought musically they were okay, but I had a really bum take on Darby Crash. I thought he was just like a Sid Vicious imitator, and the idea that he died before the movie, the idea that he died before the movie even came out was like, put me off because I was so excited by Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and the Bags, and I was very confused by Fear, but sort of in a good way. The Germs, really put a bad taste in my mouth. Oh, and X were great, of course, but years later, towards the end of the 90s, is that when this came out? In my memory, this is like 99, 2000. When was this actually published? It was Jesus Christ, am I off? 2002. This was put out by Feral House. Don Bolus, the drummer of the Germs, and Brendan Mullen, who was the owner of The Mask in LA, and Adam Parfrey, who was the guy who ran Feral House, who is now sadly gone. It's an oral history of the Germs and their Los Angeles punk rock first wave context and just their milieu. It is an absolutely stunning book. It's, I don't know, the best oral history of a band that ever was. I actually have an uncensored version because there's some dicks and stuff in here. So I think it's subsequently been censored. I think it's now dickless. But if you don't mind some dicks, I mean, I have a dick, so I'm fairly nonplussed by seeing other people's. But yeah, this is, I cannot recommend this highly enough. This is a fucking masterpiece of a book. I read the book. I don't know why I bought this, but I did. Then I went and bought the Germs MIA, and I was like, this is great, and I really liked it. And then I read the lyrics, and then I realized that Darby Crash was a fucking genius. They talked about what a lyrical genius he was and what a performance art genius he was, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I went and listened to the music, and I heard it in a whole different way and understood it a whole different way. Eventually there will be a Germs review. I really love that band, and it's because of this book. Speaking of, one day in it would have been 1990. I was a wee lad. I was 12 years old at the time, and my family stopped after church at the local library, and in the new arrivals was this particular book that I'm about to show. And my dad, thinking that I was a fan of the band, said, "Well, you should get this. He really strongly wanted it." And I was like, "Okay." So I didn't really know anything about this band. In fact, the song "The Purpose of a Man is to Love a Woman," and that song, I thought this was them. I knew that little. The Doors, Riders on the Storm, written by, of course, their great drummer, John Densmore. And so this book, I wound up, so I bought this like a year later, but I took it out of the library like 5-6 times, who knows. I read it obsessively. About halfway through reading it, I got the Doors Greatest Hits cassette, the one from 1980. That was in like every record store in America, if you were a kid of that age, with like the red diamond over Jim's face. So this book, it's probably the single most influential book in my life. In 2013 or 14, I actually met John Densmore, and he was pretty astonished to see that this was like an original printing, because it was they put it out again after the Doors movie with like a couple extra chapters or something. But this is pre-Doors movie, or somewhere in there. I think it was being made at the time. But there it is. Too Rich, Great Groove, John Densmore. Pretty cool. But yeah, this book is probably the single most influential book in my life. Because of this book, I got into or found out about Delta Blues, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Antonioni. I'd never heard of the new wave of French cinema. I didn't know any of that stuff. Lenny Bruce I got into because John Lee Hooker. I went and rented the 400 Blows because of this book. And then just interest in music. I didn't know anything about Love. I didn't even really know anything about John Lennon at this point. I mean, I was a heavy metal kid who didn't know much beyond Def Leppard and Motley Crue. So this was just Ravi Shankar. Like, I found out about Ravi Shankar through this. Like, I found out about so much through this book. It was my window to the world. It gave me everything. So yeah, this book is to blame kind of for my life since 1990. Everything comes from this. It really does. It feels almost silly to not talk about this, but it also feels silly to talk about it because I feel like it's so totemic. Please Kill Me, of course, put together by the one and only Legs McNeil. And by the way, Legs McNeil has a really cool website, and you should go check it. Legsville. You should really go check it out. It's awesome. I mean, come on. If you don't know this book, just fucking go read it. It's the most rock and roll collection of rock and roll stories that will ever be collected. It's brutally intense and awesome. It's ultimate rock and roll shit. I mean, this is like, and if you know this book, you don't need me to tell you about its greatness. Like, go read it. It's Please Kill Me. At any rate, for the love of God, check this out. I talked about this book in my Black Flag videos, and one of my viewers, David, how you doing, man? Asked me specifically about it. It's Joe Carducci's Enter Naomi. Naomi being Naomi Peterson, the photographer who sadly passed away. Her work is featured prominently, obviously, in this. This is just an incredible, elegiac, melancholic, pensive, but also realistic and tough as nails look at that time and what life was like. And kind of through, no pun intended, through the lens of Naomi's life. Joe Carducci not only was a brilliant co-owner of SST, the guy is just an amazing writer. He's written other really beloved books, but this is my favorite, and it's yeah. If you're not a fan, it will make you a fan. I don't know what else to say. And he also throws in some sociological ideas and departures and observations that are like 1,000% right. Like bang, when he's bang on the money, he's bang on the money hard. Love him. Okay. There are ultimately 3 volumes of this. I can only find this one. I have them. These are pretty beaten up by me. Bob Dylan, the Performing Artist series. This would be the middle years, 74 to 86. Written by Paul Williams. Paul Williams. I have a lot of his books. I don't know that I have all of them. I think I have most of them. Paul Williams, if you don't know, and I kind of want to take a moment in this video to talk about it. Paul Williams, I think, is probably the single most important writer about rock and roll that ever lived, and I don't think anyone's going to touch him. I think he's the first, and I think that he's the best. And I think that a lot of people have done is really a pale imitation of him. He started Crawdaddy magazine in 66, 67, somewhere in there. He predates Rolling Stone. He predates everybody. He predates anybody else writing about rock and roll as an art form, as a serious art form. I know that Robert Shelton was writing about Dylan and stuff, but you know, Paul Williams was the first guy to clock it, I think, accurately as an art form. And then he just kept it up. He was the executor of the literary archive of Philip K. Dick. Sadly, Paul Williams passed away at I forget what year he died now. But he was only like 62 or 61 or something. But he had a terrible bicycle accident that resulted in early onset dementia. And he was in a nursing home. It's awful. And he was still, like, up until I think when he went into the nursing home, like I think they tried to do home care. If I might be wrong about that, but he was still trying to write because he had crowdfunded what would have been the next full volume of this series, and there wound up being sort of a kind of a stopgap book, and then what later came out was kind of a collection of how far he had gotten up to. But these books are, and he has a great book about Brian Wilson called How Deep is the Ocean. If you're any kind of Beach Boys fan, you really should read that. It's outstanding. But Paul Williams, talk about love, talk about enthusiasm and joy. He, you know, in some respects, he could be, I suppose, a little clinical, or if you aren't a fan or on the same wavelength as in terms of how intense he is into things, it can maybe be a little slow going at times. But if you're on his wavelength, and if you've heard the stuff that he's talking about, it's amazing. And it's not that he just is in love with things. He is very critical at times, sometimes surprisingly so. But you know, he really, really, really contextualizes Dylan brilliantly. This is some of the best writing about somebody. These books are absolute gems. Or these books, maybe a better way of putting it, are treasure chests full of gems. How about that? And yeah, so I'm a huge fan of all of his books, and this just happened to be the one that I was able to find. The other ones are back there somewhere. We might as well do this. Yes, Keith Richards' life. It's his autobiography. Come on, it's Keith. But the thing about this book, some old habits never die. Still using toilet paper as a bookmark. I did realize that was in here. I mean, if you've read this, you've read it. It's awesome. It's one of the best autobiographies. Keith really goes deep into technique and really goes deep into how he realizes his ideas. And I just think it's so generous and so cool to dedicate such a huge part of a book to talking about that stuff in such detail. And it counterbalances some of the crazier rock and roll kind of stories. And there's plenty of that. But there's a lot of art and a lot of reality and a lot of soul, I guess. A lot of soul. It's a great, great book. And Keith, you know, it's everything you could want from Keith writing a book, you know? From autobiography to biography, this is Jimmy McDonough's masterpiece. Is this the single best book ever written about rock and roll? I don't know, maybe. Shakey. Yes, it's ostensibly a biography about Neil Young, done up to a point with Neil's involvement. Kleenex was the bookmark where I last left off. I have read this book in sections, but cumulatively probably 50 or 60 times. To use Jimmy McDonough's own phrase, it is psychic rocket fuel. It's amazing. There's a lot that I've learned from this book. There's a lot of wisdom in this book. It's amazing. As much as it's about Neil, it's about rock and roll. It's awesome. I love this thing. So, yeah. And it's funny, because when I first saw it in the bookstore, I'm like, oh, there's no way anybody could have written a decent version of Neil Young's life story. That was my first thought. How dumb was that? It's an amazing, amazing book. And now we're getting down to the last two. I bought this in England when I was in England in 1992. It's written by Tim Riley. He did another book about Bob Dylan, which I read years later, which I liked. But this is the masterpiece. I want to say this is the single best book about the Beatles ever written. Tell Me Why. So as we took bus tours along the English countryside, I was sitting in the back of the bus reading this book, devouring it, because I was still pretty new to the Beatles' discography at this point. I had all of the American albums that my aunt had given me, her old records from the 60s that she would have bought as they came out. So what I did when I got home was I went and made mixtapes of the British sequences. This was the first book. The CDs had only been out for a couple of years, so most Americans still thought, like, I've Just Seen a Face was on Rubber Soul, or, you know. So I went home and made mixtapes of all of the British sequences and singles, etc., etc. I created the Long Tall Sally EP, you know, the whole thing. And I just, this book taught me how to listen to music. It really did. It taught me how to listen to albums. And to this day, it's so foundational for me. Like, to this day, like, how I hear albums, it comes from this book. The idea of opening track side one, closing track of side one, how side two opens, how those openers sort of talk to each other, how the closers talk to each other, how the album is balanced, what the slope of the album is, what, on and on and on, how they organize the material, tempos, themes, ideas, whatever. Yeah, I learned it all here. This is just an incredible book. And I mean, if you like the Beatles, there are some people who, he clearly is a John guy. He's a bit biased against Paul, as much as he recognizes Paul's genius. And there are times where he is frustratingly dismissive of George on here. However, this is still an absolutely phenomenal book. And people go on about Revolution in the Head, the Ian MacDonald thing. I thought that book was a pale, sorry version of this. This one gets it right. So, and Paul McCartney himself was a little about Revolution in the Head, and though I don't know Paul with I like this too much. But this is an absolutely incredible book. One of my all-time favorites. And as musical analysis, it's top of the line. And finally, we end this thing the only way we could with, God damn it, the 1992 Rolling Stone album guide. Look at this fucking thing. Look at this. Look at where a teenage Rich scrawled. Look at where a teenage Rich got bored when he had a knife on him and started slicing pages out, or sliced a chunk of the back cover off. There's just like this, because this is pre-internet. I didn't have certain artists I went through with a yellow magic marker as I would buy the albums. Where's the Dylan one? Because I think I wound up. I know I did this. I know I did it with Dylan. I know I did it with Lou Reed. Yeah. This is, as I bought them, I would have. But this book, I mean, like, I tried not to get too many opinions from this book, because even at that young of an age and that impressionable of an age, I realized that a lot of this was really, really, really biased to the baby boomers. And anything with J.D. Considine wrote about older bands, like punk bands, and then post-punk. There's Lou Reed. And you could almost entirely disregard anything J.D. Considine had. So when you would see J.D.C. at the bottom of an entry, you'd be like, oh boy. But yeah, there it is. Rolling Stone album guide. 1992. And it's also hilarious because it was just as Nirvana was breaking. So it's just this weird moment in time that's frozen that is, you know, it's a timepiece. And I don't know why the hell anyone would want to read it, especially now, 30 some years later. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's just a fun little run through some of my favorite books. I will be back with something with a little bit more meat to it very soon. So until then, hope you enjoyed this, and hope you're all doing well out there. And like and comment and subscribe, and YouTube ahoy. And until next time, bye!
Just finished watching Rich Talks Records. Now